Well, they're setting up. Just wanted to welcome everyone. We're blessed to have our fire department. They came from a long ways away, across the street. They did bring the truck, so there were about 20 kids out in the parking lot going, oh. I think they think they're getting rides, but they'll be disappointed later. But thank you very much for coming out. We're going to be talking about CPR, and one example I would just want to bring up, we never know when things are going to happen, and whether for ourselves, a loved one, or even just a stranger walking someplace and something happens. So the more we know, the better, right? So we had a situation here with church just very recently where at our golf outing, one of our members on the 18th hole literally just, and thankfully that person was surrounded by people that knew what to do and jumped in and started helping and called 911, which is always the thing you should do first. Get the experts coming right away with all of their equipment, right? But because of that, that person's doing well today. They were very sick for a long time, but really are doing well now. So we're really thankful for that. But this is the kind of stuff we need to know, so we know what to do right away. Our emergency procedures group has been talking about all the stuff we have here at church. How do we respond to emergencies? And this is one of the things we wanted to really try to offer was some simple training for all of us so we can be ready to go on things. So without further ado, I'll let you guys introduce yourselves at Wauwatosa Fire Department. Thank you.
Hello folks, I'm Lieutenant Rob Reed.
Lieutenant Reisdorf.
Justin Jopius.
Aaron Spahn. Dan Shepard.
So at any given time, there's 8 of us at the station right across the street. We have a truck and an engine currently. We're prepared to do any type of medical stuff, even though we're just an engine and a truck. And if we need an ambulance, we can get one from another station or shared services. The first thing we're going to talk about is hands-only CPR. 2 of the guys will kind of demonstrate it, what to do if someone is found unresponsive or down. And the simplest thing, the first thing you're going to do if someone goes down or you find someone down, is you're going to tap them. You're going to ask them if they're okay. If they're not, or they don't respond, the very next thing we want you to do is call 911. Get us going. Get us to the site. Once you've done that, the dispatcher will stay on the phone with you until we get there. That's very important. They can help you with CPR if you haven't done this before or you forget about it. But the key thing is to start pushing on the chest. And they're going to demonstrate how you put your hand on the center of the chest, right across the nipple line, and you start pushing. Hard and fast. And you just keep going, about 100 to 120 times a minute. Now with hands-only CPR, you don't have to do any breathing, no breaths in the mouth. There's a natural kind of vacuum that they're going to get enough oxygen in to at least keep them getting oxygen to their brain until we get there. That's the key. Some of the other key points, if they're sitting in a chair or whatever, get them on a hard, flat surface. You don't want to put them on the bed or something like that. Your compressions are not going to be good. So if you can get them down onto the floor, kneel right next to them, extend your arms all the way, and keep pushing. The other thing is I mentioned that you're going to stay on the phone with the dispatcher. If you have any questions, they can talk you through it all. They may ask you a ton of questions too if you know the person, if it's a family member, history, because the more information you can give to them, they will get it to us through the computer on the rigs. So when we come in, we know kind of what we're getting into. Any questions?
Does it depend upon the size of the victim as to how hard you press or quickly?
It can, if they're a bigger person, yes, but you just want to push as hard and as fast as you can. Obviously, on someone who's small and frail, you gotta be a little careful. And I'll say this is a little shock warning here. You may break a rib or two. That happens if you're doing CPR correctly, especially on a frail or elderly. Yeah, that's gonna happen. But a broken rib, to save their life, the rib will heal.
I noticed you keep your arms straight while you're doing this.
If you can just use your upper body weight to get over the patient,
Okay.
it's just gonna be a lot easier, less exhausting on your muscles, especially if you're doing it for 6 or 8 minutes. Hopefully we can get there sooner, depending on exactly where we are. But it'll help your fatigue just better form.
Straight across the chest.
Yeah, but if you can get your body weight up directly over the chest, you're using your weight to go down instead of just using your arm muscles.
Okay. So you use that upper body.
Yeah, draw an imaginary line right across like the nipple line. You want to be right in the middle of that. That's exactly where you want to be pushing.
You hear a lot about making sure their airway is open, is that part of this?
Yes, you do want to make sure that their head is in we call it neutral position. You don't want it too far up, but the key is to get on the chest right away.
There's just a lot of research that's just showing, just from a layman's standpoint, that if there's already enough oxygen in the blood, if you see them collapse, that's just your compressions alone. You don't have to worry about getting any more oxygen, no more breaths. So even if they had an obstructed airway, as long as you're getting that circulated blood until we can get there to determine that we have to clear the airway, you're doing the first step.
Should you be checking to see if there's a pulse first before you apply CPR? No?
I think the first step is that if you're talking, you're trying to tap the person, are you okay, are you okay?
Right.
It is possible that they could have a pulse at that point,
Yeah.
but we're just trying to water this down all the way down, that if they had a pulse that wasn't effective enough, that your CPR is going to help aid with that.
If you start pushing on their chest and they don't like it, they're going to let you know. That's the way we look at it.
Can I mention, we bought the CPR in a box, right? If you could hold that up. One thing we got with our group is this is a little box set. It's got a DVD in it. You can take it home with you. We'll have it in the library for you to check out.
Oh, we passed it around.
Yeah, and it's essentially, it's not the full dummy, so it's not as nice as those, but it's just a simple little bag that you can practice on. One thing I think it's really interesting is how really hard you have to push, because this will give you a response back if you've done it well enough. So you hear a click when you've actually done it. And most of us, myself included, if I was doing this, would just be kind of gently doing it. I don't want to hurt anybody, but you're actually hurting them by not doing it hard enough. So this gives you a response. If you want to try this at home, you really get a sense of how hard that is. And with that, then you also realize how exhausting this is to do this, because even after a minute, you're going to be really tired. Because what is it? How many compressions a minute you're saying?
100 to 120.
100 to 120 compressions in a minute. So imagine doing that 120 times. So that's the kind of thing, it might even be good to say, hey, I need a friend to take over for me, where you're switching periodically to be ready for it. But we've got this so people can experience this at home if you want to try it. Again, it's only hands-on CPR. You're not doing mouth-to-mouth with this or anything. So it's just experiencing that. But so you get a sense of how quick and how hard you have to do it. So that's one little tool we have.
I'll mention this about a bunch of the things we're talking about today is anytime during the week, Monday through Friday, if you come down to the station here between 8 and let's say 5 o'clock, Lori is our PR director for a lot of this. She can help you. She can get brochures for any of this stuff we're talking about. If you want more information on the CPR or you want to practice it, there's always guys around the firehouse that can physically do it with you too.
and piggybacking on that, sorry to keep talking, but we also have worked out with your chief that in 2 weeks, 2 Sundays, we've got a training in the afternoon with you guys. So at 1 on the 27th, if you'd like to come and do a much more extensive with the dummies and practice and more intensive, it's not the full CPR training, you're not certified after you're done, but it really gives you a good hands-on. You guys are at 1 on the 27th, we're inviting the congregation to come and right after lunch and do that. So please put that on your calendars as well.
That's at,
Across the street at your home.
Okay. Yeah, and we'll have a lot, some life-size like dummies over there that have that same click
Yeah.
method that you were speaking of on your CPR in a box.
Right.
So that you can kind of feel how hard you should have to push on a normal-sized adult.
When she was asking about the pulse, it reminded me of something about the CPR class that I had taken. And what we were told was they don't want you doing that anymore because they were seeing that people were taking 30 seconds, a minute and a half, just trying to find a pulse. Because we're not experienced on exactly where to try to find it or what an adequate pulse is.
And it doesn't do
And
damage?
that long without oxygen is going to do more damage than we could possibly do just trying to do CPR if they have
On a heart that's beating?
a bleeding heart.
CPR on a heart that's beating is not a problem.
Yeah, actually, in a lot of cases, like, and we're gonna go over the AED next, but a lot of times if we shock your heart and it goes back into a normal rhythm, we're right back on the chest because we wanna keep that blood circulating. So even with a beating heart, a lot of times we're still doing CPR.
If we're by ourselves, because I had to call 911 one time, and I remember them being very aggressive about asking me these questions, and if we're by ourselves, at what point, I mean, do we basically call them and say, I have somebody unresponsive, I'm by myself, I'm dropping the phone and I'm gonna, and pretty much just kind of like go, I will leave the phone on and, but I mean, obviously if we're by ourselves, we can't hold the phone and try to.
If it's a speaker phone, you put it on speaker and you talk to the dispatcher as you're working on the patient.
Okay.
That's the best way to do it if you have a cell phone.
As long as they know where you are, they have a good address, we're
Yeah.
on our way.
Okay.
That's the key. So worst case scenario, yeah, you're not paying attention to them, but you're doing compressions. We're gonna be there shortly.
You keep doing this until you come?
Yes. So you see us, and then we'll take over immediately.
Make sure you give them the address.
Address is very important. I mean, especially with cell phones, you know, it's not like landlines anymore where they know where that is.
Yeah.
And cell phones, sometimes they go through different dispatchers, so they may not know exactly where you are. So give a good address where you are. If you're in a building like this, where you are in this building, because if we have an address, we'll be walking through this building trying to find you.
How do you get into a house if it's locked?
Yeah.
Well, that's funny you ask. I have something for you.
There's different options. We kind of really
We can
talked
get
about
in.
one, but we can get in there, try to get in there without having to break a locker or a window or damage your property. But if that's what needs to happen so that we can get in there quickly to aid somebody that is down and isn't breathing, then by all means we'll do that.
We always have a way in, we have tools. But at home, especially if you live alone, we do offer these things you can purchase through the department, and we have this information again. You can stop there during the week, but it's a lockbox that only the fire department can get into. You put your key in there. You put your key in there, and then if you call and maybe you can't get to the door because you fell or something, we can get into your house then without kicking in the door and causing damage.
And we have something similar just outside your church here that I was here a couple weeks back. If we come here after business hours, so we're not going to do damage to the building, to the property here, we can get in, they call it a Knox box, so we have a key, we can get into that box, and then we have access into the building so that no one else is able to get in.
Do other fire departments have this, since I don't live in Wauwatosa, so it wouldn't help if I gave you my information, because you won't be coming to my place in New Berlin.
Do the other fire departments
Well, have
provide?
this thing,
A lockbox.
this lockbox thing, so
I would
that,
imagine they have something similar to them if you give them a call and ask about it.
so if you're in Brookfield or wherever you are, you have to get it from them.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, that's a good thing to have in case you lose it. Find it.
That is, that's another thing.
So,
We should get that.
any other questions on the CPR portion of it? Now we're gonna move on to the AED, because if you're doing compressions, there's a chance that maybe their heart is in a rhythm that isn't compatible with life, and it needs to be shocked out of it. So if let's say you're here, we'll just say you're here, and someone's down, someone started CPR, send someone to pick up the AED, and he's gonna kind of demonstrate it. If you listen, it actually talks to you, it'll tell you what to do, so.
And we have 2 of these in the building, and they're at both kitchens. So go to one of the kitchens. This kitchen, it's at the other end, kind of right in the middle of the building. The other one's upstairs by the coffee hour kitchen, is right inside the kitchen. And we've got it marked on the outside where the AED machine is, so.
By all means, too, if you have somebody in your congregation that is an EMT or has used an AED before, is just more comfortable, then put that person in charge. It just, talk to you as a group, but you might not be that person that's actually running the machine. So if you have somebody that's more comfortable, obviously use those resources first.
Most of the AEDs that are in different buildings, these days, most of them, not all, but most of them have picture and voice prompts. So if you've never used one before, it's very simple to use. You grab it, the first thing you want to do is turn it on. Sometimes when you turn it on, it'll go through a little check, and you'll hear some prompts.
Unit okay. Stay calm. Check responsiveness. Call for help. Attach defib pads to patient's bare chest.
So it goes through exactly what you're supposed to do when you find someone down or you witness someone going down.
Attach defib pads to patient's bare chest.
And as you can see, there's not only pictures on the unit as it's going through its prompts, but there's also pictures on the front of the unit and actually on the pads to show you exactly how to place these on a patient. All right?
Attach defib pads to patient's bare chest.
There's stickies on these. We're not going to use that because this is a trainer, but there's stickies. This goes right in the center of the chest where we were talking about the nipple line. And then these go right here. The shock actually goes through the chest, so it goes across the heart, and that's why this is down lower.
Attach defib pads to patient's bare chest.
Once you attach that, it senses that you attach that and it's on the patient.
Don't touch patient. Analyze it.
The person that's working this is in charge of that right now.
Analyze it.
So when it's analyzing, you're not supposed to be touching the patient as it's prompting.
Shock advised. Don't touch patient. Press flashing shock button.
So the person that's in charge of this says, everyone, don't touch the patient, stand clear.
Don't touch patient.
When they see that no one is touching the patient, they can shock if it's prompted to, and it is. So then you press the shock button, which is
don't touch patient.
Right there.
Shock delivered. Start CPR.
So it delivers the shock. Now that most of these units have that's how fast you're supposed to be compressing. One of the it's kind of funny, but one of the songs that they say you're supposed to go to is "Staying Alive." You know. And then 30 compressions. It stops if someone is able to give breaths. Sometimes they have an isolation kit with some of these kits, which you can put on the patient if you would be delivering breaths, but that's how you get that pause in between the 30 compressions to 2 breaths. So it'll go through the sequence, and then after it goes through, we'll just let it go through 3 rounds of 30 to 2. If you're not giving breaths, if you're just doing hands-on CPR, then you just keep going as long as you can. If there's another person there that can take your place, because you do get fatigued very quickly take their place at the break and just keep going with the 30 compressions, or keep going with compressions if you're not doing breaths. So it'll go through these three cycles, and then it'll analyze. This analyzes itself. You don't have to. It's all automatic. Do you want to add anything while it's going through this last cycle?
You know, it says to put these pads on their bare skin. I mean, it is really important for this to be able to read the rhythm correctly, so try to provide privacy and protect the patient, your friend's dignity, by
Stop CPR.
keeping them in an
Don't
area
touch
that
patient.
you can still work, but make sure that you do get their undergarments off, get their clothes off, so that those do go on their bare
Don't
chest.
touch patient.
We also
Analyze.
purchased privacy blankets,
Oh, very nice.
so we can put that up,
No shock advised.
people,
Start
so they
CPR.
create the privacy.
So now it just said no shock advised. It read the rhythm. Originally it said shockable rhythm, deliver shock. You delivered a shock, you did 3 rounds of CPR, and then it analyzed again. It said no shock advised, so it asked you to continue. Hopefully by that time, we will be there and we can take over. So,
But you could have to shock the person a second.
correct, yes. If it reads the rhythm and it's a shockable rhythm, it will say shock again. Absolutely. So, any other questions?
Is there routine battery maintenance that should go with these?
Yes, on most of these readouts, on this one, now this isn't a trainer, so we're not gonna practice with this one now, depending upon what your policy is here.
We changed them out, yeah.
Okay, but they normally have a little LED on these that tells you.
It's on the side. It's got a tag on the side, I believe.
Okay, so these are checked regularly. On a lot of AEDs that are in churches, airports, shopping centers, they have a little LED that has a little check mark.
Expiration date.
And if the battery is too low, it'll go to like an X. So it tells you that they're in need of replacement. So it's a good idea to know where you store your AEDs on location. So in case of emergency, someone goes, I know where it is, go get it.
Again, for us, it's the 2 kitchens. So this one down here is, the design is it's kind of right in the center of the building. So you walk in, you'll see AED on the door, and then upstairs in the upper kitchen by the coffee hour, just inside the kitchen, you'll see it right there. And I would recommend that every one of us just goes and touches it. Just go and see it. Now you know exactly where it is. You've seen it. You know, let's do a little scavenger hunt after this and go find the 2 AEDs in the building. So then you know exactly, you've seen them, you've touched them, you know where it is.
And again, just to reiterate, the most important thing to do if someone does go down is make that phone call to get advanced life care on its way, get us on the way. And then if you're not alone, direct someone to go get the AED or the medical kit and start, if they need it, start hands-on CPR.
And one note with ours, they're in a box on the wall. When you open that door, a very loud alarm will go off. That's it. That's supposed to do that. So it kind of alerts, hey, something's going on here, and more people start to notice. It's not just one person. You want more people involved in all this. So that's okay if it goes off. When you shut the door again, it'll go off. But it's designed to do that. It's also partially designed to keep certain third graders, out of it as well. But
One of the other things too, our units.
The curious ones.
Infant, and they have adult pads in them. They're in the compartment in the back. So there's also 2 sets of there's 2 adults. There's a set of adult pads already attached to the unit. There's a spare adult pad in back, and there's also an infant pad in there.
It says right on them.
What do these policy blankets look like? Is it?
They look like a blanket.
It's just a blanket and then you just.
Yep.
over the person?
That other people have to hold up.
Here's the blanket here, this is what it looks like, it's a standard emergency blanket, it's used on the squads, it is also waterproof, so you can, if you needed to cover the person, or if you need to wrap them up, that's what these blankets are for, these are emergency blankets, they're yellow.
I'm a little bit confused. If something happens, you do the first thing that you showed us first? Or do you use that also?
The first thing you do is check responsiveness to
Yes,
see if
right,
they're responsive
right,
at all.
right.
If they're not responsive, then you can start to get us on the way, make a phone
Right,
call,
right.
and then start hands-on CPR.
Okay.
If there's an AED in the building,
Okay.
then have someone go get it and bring it while you're,
So that's the same thing as that? But if they
It
have.
can
this-
happen together at the same time.
Okay.
yeah.
So it's okay to stop CPR to check with the AED then? To see if it's
Someone,
like-
if you've got multiple people,
Yeah.
someone goes and gets the CPR, it's most important to keep going on the chest. That's the most important. That's gonna keep the blood circulating. So you wanna stay on the chest as long as possible. Then, if they're not non-responsive, if you can get that on them so that I can analyze it quick, get it on them and analyze.
Okay.
So you do that as soon as possible to analyze?
Correct.
There's not a time span where you should do a CPR for, say, 1 minute, and then if it doesn't work, go to the AED?
Well, while you're setting the AED up, getting it out and on, someone should be doing the hands-on CPR. And you can do CPR where this, you see, everyone sees where that is on the chest. You can do CPR while this is on.
Okay, while they're putting
Yes.
it in place?
And then that machine prompted you, it's probably hard to hear, but it said stop CPR, back up while it's analyzing, and then it will tell you back on the chest or shock advised, push the red button. Yes,
A
sir.
lot of people assume because they're across the street, if we dial 911, you'd be here in 10 seconds, but you might be out on a call.
Correct.
So you could assume you may be doing CPR for more than a minute.
Yes, sir.
Especially if it's witnessed, if you're right there. Yeah, absolutely.
If you were in some remote area off in the woods or something, will this CPR possibly restart their heart? Or you can't expect to get help anytime in the near future?
I was gonna say, very remotely, if their heart is stopped, that you're gonna start it again just by doing CPR. I'm not an expert on that, it's probably not gonna happen, but the best thing to do is just as long as you can, get that blood circulating, keep that oxygen going to vital organs.
A lot of the time, this could happen while we have a service going on. You got like 300 people in there, 200 people. And typically there are several doctors at each of the services. Is it safe to assume that doctors know how to operate an AED?
Nothing against any
doctor
medical,
there.
yeah, never-
They may have been trained, but it could be 20 years ago.
Yeah, it could have been a long time ago, so.
They're not required to stay up. Foot doctor.
Anytime there's an emergency and there's a large amount of people, if there's any nurses, EMTs, paramedics, doctors, they're gonna come and try to help. And they'll say who they are a lot of times. So.
Call the fire department.
Well, yes, get us on the way because they're not gonna have the equipment that we have to administer that advanced care. So get us on the way immediately.
Even if you get some sort of response, a gurgle or, something like that, after you say, are you okay, are you okay? Then should you, but they're confused or they are beyond the gurgle, should you do this CPR?
If a gurgle noise that's not them being responsive.
Oh.
If you ask them a question and they somehow can respond to you on that, that's responsive.
That's
Or if you rub on their chest really hard or shake them and they're responsive
If
to
they're moving
pain.
around on their own, if they're, if you kind of startle them and they turn their head a little, then no. But if they don't respond at all, then just go right to starting CPR. Going back to that question on the remote setting, would rescue breathing in addition to, I realize that's an old-fashioned term, but rescue breathing
in addition to the CPR as you described, have any chance of starting the heart? Would that increase that?
No, so CPR, basically what we're doing is, so your heart works like a pump, all right? It's continuously pumping. If it stops working, we're basically manually doing that. So imagine, you know, like the old faucets that you gotta just continuously pump to get water to pour out. That's basically what you're doing. You're never gonna get that where you're not gonna get that to just continuously flow on its own. So you're basically just taking over to manually provide that. And as soon as you stop, that pump kind of stops. Breathing just adds in, you know, that oxygen.
Just buys you some time.
Yeah. So stick with just pretty much the hands-on CPR. A lot of the studies are showing that compressions are way more beneficial than doing the breathing in addition to it also.
And then one other thing too, all of these are set up, as soon as you open it up, they'll start talking to you. So you don't have to push any buttons or anything else.
Follow these voice instructions.
Not all of them.
The ones that we've got here.
Yeah, the ones that you have here, once you open it, it turns itself on. This, you actually, there's a lot of AEDs out there that you have to turn it on. The first thing you have to do is turn it on, and then it'll start talking to you. So.
One thing I want to mention, often in church, something will happen, and the question becomes, should we call 911? We always want to err on the side of calling 911. I know I've had a lot of people, when things happen, say to me, oh, I've got somebody here, they'll drive me over. I'm sure I'll make it, you know? That's a bad move. It's much better for us to call 911, have the guys come out, and then, right then as they're assessing, the experts are assessing, they will also say, well, we'll take you over to Freighter, and that's where the person can say, no, I'm rejecting that, and they can be the experts to make that call. But it's always better to call 911, get them here as fast as possible, because they might just be starting something that gets worse. It's better to get them coming and let them be the ones that really make that decision. And then if you're involved with a situation, if it's a group you're doing, maybe it's a small Bible study that you're a part of or something, it's always good to have someone go to the main doors and wait there, so then when they get here, you walk them right into the space. Obviously, if you're up in the bridal chapel having a Bible study, it's hard to find that, you know. So it's much better to have somebody go to the door, walk them in as somebody else is staying with them. But always kind of call 911. That's pretty much what we're leaning towards as a church, because it's always better to have them be the ones that are making that assessment as opposed to the Bible study group going, I don't know, they look all right. I think they, well, their color's a little off, you know. It's much better to call, get help, and then let them make that decision after they arrive, okay? So don't question it, just call, okay? And then have somebody go to the door to welcome them and help them get to where they need to go.
Pastor Chris just mentioned the hospital. Do you just take them to the nearest hospital or to a hospital that they want to go to or that they are associated with?
It depends on the call. If it's something really serious, then we're going to go to the closest, most appropriate. If you'd like to go somewhere else, and it's not a very serious condition, and the length of transport time isn't going to affect the outcome, then we would take you wherever your insurance is covered, or wherever you're comfortable in going.
Any more questions on this?
Over here.
I don't carry a phone, so if I am, say, upstairs cleaning up or out in the yard reading or something, and somebody has an accident there, do I run inside in search of a phone or another person, or I don't have communication ability?
Yeah, unfortunately, that's probably what you'd want to do.
Go inside.
Because otherwise you're alone.
Yeah.
And eventually you're going to want us there. So unless there's someone there that can go for you, get us coming first and then do what you can. If that's all on this, we're gonna turn it over to Justin. He's gonna talk about these kits that you guys have, these stop bleed kits that can be used for just about any type of trauma. He'll talk about it. Hopefully not scaring you.
So you guys have these kits, I believe they're located with your defibrillators?
So we have set up right by the defibrillators. You'll see a big red cross on the door that denotes where these kind of things are. So we have all sorts of first aid stuff in there, and this is one of them.
Okay. So inside these red kits are these little pouches with some different items in them. So there's some different bandages in here, there's a tourniquet in here, there's a scissors in here. So basically, this stuff is used, like Lieutenant Reed said, you can use this on any type of serious bleed, really. First and foremost, I kind of just want to talk about when you have something bleeding, one of the best things that you can do is just put direct pressure on it. We've got lots of fancy equipment in here. We carry lots of fancy equipment on our ambulances and our fire trucks and engines. But one of the most important things you can do is just push on it. All right, because putting that direct pressure on a lot of the time is going to stop the bleed. So some of that basic stuff we want to keep in mind too. But if you have a really serious bleed, so unfortunately these kind of came into play because I'm sure everyone here has seen the news in the last 5 years, but we have lots of active shooters. So this is kind of where this is starting to come from. These mass casualty incidents, and people were dying because they were bleeding out. So we have these kits now to kind of try and prevent that. So a lot of the time what we're going to do is use the equipment in here to try and potentially save someone's life just like we would with CPR. So one of the things that's in here is a tourniquet. And for a long time everyone said, no, don't put a tourniquet on a limb, that's bad for it. That's not true anymore. They found that tourniquets are very helpful, and you're not going to necessarily lose a limb just because there's a tourniquet on it or something like that. So this is one of the first things that we want to do. If you have a serious bleed, if you're working in your yard, or you're cooking and you cut yourself and it's spurting blood, it's okay to put a tourniquet on. What we really recommend doing is kind of just putting it, either just, you want it above the bleed, so these two guys will demonstrate here. So if Danny here is bleeding on his arm, we can probably put it just 3 to 8 inches above. And so these tourniquets are preset like this, where it's basically, it has a hole in the center. You put the limb through it. You can use them on legs. You can use them on arms. And then what he does is he pulls it tight as he can. And then there's this little stick attached to it. All right, that's the best way I can describe it to you guys. And then Aaron's going to twist it, and twist it, and twist it. He's not going to do it to Danny because it's going to hurt his arm. But you twist it until the bleeding stops. And it's uncomfortable, and it's a little bit painful. So if you're doing it to someone and they're in pain and uncomfortable, you're doing it correct.
Just real quick to show you, when you're twisting this, when you get the bleeding stops, it's got this rigid little like hooks here. That's how you hook it in. When you're done twisting, that's how it stays where it's supposed to stay. And then you just put this back over. Yeah, he was checking a pulse to see if there was still a pulse. Because if you can get the bleeding to stop and still have a pulse on that limb, that's a good thing, obviously, because they're still getting blood flow. But if there's no pulse and you need to keep that tight to stop the bleeding, well then that's what you need to do.
Perfect. So basically you tighten it down until the bleeding stops. And we don't want to take it off again until they're at the hospital. So you guys have those inside of your kits. So that's something you guys might see. Another thing that you have is a Band-Aid. There's a bandage in there called Quick Clot. So what this is, it's kind of a fancy bandage that has eggshells on it. It's literally what it is. It's a piece of gauze with some eggshells, and it's very, very, very effective at stopping bleeding. So you guys might be thinking, all right, if you have a serious bleed on an arm or a leg, you put a tourniquet on it, and you aren't bleeding anymore. You can stop the bleed that way. However, I can't put a tourniquet on my neck. I can't put a tourniquet on my stomach. I can't put a tourniquet in the groin area. So, on your sides, things like that. So you might be wondering, how do I stop a bleed there? This Quick Clot gauze is what you use. And to do this, you basically take it out. There's a long strip of gauze, and you just pack it onto the wound. And it'll start absorbing that blood really well, and it stops essentially slows it down or stops the bleed. No.
And just to reiterate, this isn't if somebody falls down and skins their knee up. They have a skin kit. This is, unfortunately, gunshot wounds, penetrating, stabbing wounds, life
So
or death.
you're working in the yard and you slip with the chainsaw. And that's the kind of bleeding that this stuff is for.
Yeah, kind of to reinforce the seriousness of the bleeding when you're doing that. My understanding is those were created by our military.
Yes.
For wartime wounds and
Yes.
so on, so it's a big deal.
So those are the, and that's perfect, because those are the seriousness, and like Lieutenant Reisdorf said, it's not the little slips and falls, that's where some of that direct pressure I said. You can always put direct pressure on any kind of bleeding, but it's the very serious stuff where you want to move into this. One of the other things you guys have in here is kind of a bandage like this. Again, you can just wrap a wound with it. So we'll wrap around, we'll keep wrapping until it's all on here. You can wrap it really tight, and then it's got this little kind of triangle thing on here, this moon. You just wrap the gauze through there and you can pull it back on itself really tight. Again, this is some of that stuff where when you guys potentially come over to the fire station, if any of you are there, these are some of the things that we can actually get a little bit more hands-on with and actually practice doing. Anyone have anything else on bleeding? Any questions on any of the bleeding stuff?
Yeah, you get that, you cut yourself in the kitchen, it won't stop bleeding, but just to elevate, it'll stop.
Yep, so little elevation and the direct pressure is a good thing. Anything else with bleeding?
I mean, and don't be afraid to give us a call again if somebody does cut their finger in the kitchen or it scrapes up their knee. Not that you guys put this on, but we come over and we can help tape it up and do an assessment and tell you whether we think you need to go over to the emergency room and get some stitches and get cleaned up versus putting a tourniquet on. So. Any other questions?
Any other questions people have?
There's just a couple other things on our list that we're going to talk about. Just basic, I had mentioned.
I think you have one more question here.
Oh,
I was just wondering if you could briefly go over the choking, what you do if someone's choking, as long as you're here. The Heimlich maneuver, is that still what people do, or?
Sure, so the Heimlich maneuver is still in existence. So kind of what would happen, I guess I'll demonstrate on Danny here. So if Danny's choking, first thing like everything, we want to ask him, are you okay? All right, kind of our universal choking sign that most people are going to do if they're choking.
And if they say, yes, I'm choking, they're not choking.
They just want a hug at that
point. So if I ask Danny if he's okay and he's just making all sorts of noises, he can't talk, he's like this, I'm going to come behind him, I'm kind of going to find his belly button, or best that I can, put one hand here, put the other one over it, and you're just going to squeeze and give him as many thrusts as you can until it pops out. Again, if you can have someone call 911 as you're doing it, before you start doing it, that's good too. That way we can get coming in case you can't get it dislodged.
And in a true choking, what would happen is that Danny eventually will then pass out because he's not breathing anymore on his own, and then you're going to resort right back to doing your CPR until we can get you.
Get them to the ground safely, and hands-on CPR, start doing compressions.
A lot of times they say pound them on the back. You do that before that, or you just go to the Heimlich?
No, you just want to encourage them to keep coughing. So
Yeah.
try to get them to cough it up first, and then take them to the ground. Or Heimlich.
If they're choking, their natural reaction, they're trying to clear it themselves. You patting them on the back could make it worse. So I don't recommend that. Let them try and clear it themselves. Like I said, if they can at least speak, that means they're still breathing. So you don't want to do anything to make it worse until they give you the sign and they're not talking anymore, don't do anything. But you could call us if you think it's serious. It's fine if they clear it and we get here and they're fine, everything's good. Anything else on that? The last couple of things I started to say is we have a lot of brochures, hundreds it seems like, on different things at the firehouse. I'd recommend stopping down. A couple of the items that we want to talk about, one I talked about was the lock boxes. The other things are these go right on your refrigerator. People these days take hundreds of medications. And we show up and we don't know what they're on, what's wrong with them, their history. They're down on the ground, they can't tell us. It's always, and I'll just blame the husbands on this, it's always, ask my wife, she knows what's wrong with me. So if he's not available, there's a problem. So we recommend you come pick one of these up, you fill it out, put it on your refrigerator, and we'll look for this. Also, keeping something like this in your wallet or your purse is a good idea if you're not at home. It just helps us out, it'll help the doctors out, the nurses out. There are certain drugs we don't want to give if you're on something for whatever your condition is. So we'll recommend these. And then again, the lock boxes, these you can purchase for a small fee. We'll come help you install them if need be. That's all we have for today. If you have any other questions.
Are you gonna show what defibrillator use?
That was the AED.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Would you like to say what you should do for a nosebleed?
Tourniquet on.
I had
Tourniquet, yeah.
My brother, his daughter was bleeding profusely, and they were terrified, and fire department finally arrived, and they went.
That's about all we do. We have a little lamp, we put it on there. You can put an ice pack on there. The one thing I'll recommend is don't tilt your head back. You don't want that blood in your stomach. It's very irritating. You'll probably throw up. So we always recommend keep your head forward, clamp it, ice packs. And if you can't get it to stop, call us and we'll put a clamp on. At the hospital, I mean, because it does happen, some people we just can't get them to stop. They can go in there with their special tools and get it to stop.
The boogeyman in the room, we hesitate because, oh my gosh, I'll get a bill for $1,000 for this, my insurance has got a problem. Do you have one charge if you show up and everything's okay as opposed to if you have to transport them?
There's no charge for us to show up. There's
Okay.
charges for transport. We don't get involved in that. That's at a higher level.
I think that's where some of the hesitation comes in.
Yeah, some people are worried about that, but especially if you're a citizen of Wauwatosa, they handle it a little differently. But if you're sick and you need help,
Oh, yeah.
money shouldn't be the.
Well, I realize that fully, but I can already falls in there.
But yeah, you can always call us. We can at least see what's going on.
Like the pastor said, just get us coming, and then when we get here, we can always just do an assessment and determine what the best path is for you to do. Whether family and friends take you, you're okay, you don't need to go in, or it's in the best interest that we give you a ride over.
Well, that's good, it allays that fear then.
If we're just doing an assessment, and even if we use some equipment there, and they don't want to be transported, and we determine that we're okay with that, there's no charge for that.
Can you say something about do not resuscitate bracelets? I live at Luther Manor, and 5 out of 6 of us have not resuscitate bracelets.
I'll say this, if you have a DNR and you don't want to wear your bracelet, at least have the paperwork handy, have your family members know where it is. Because we go to houses a lot of times, they're like, oh, he's got a DNR. Unless we see that bracelet or the necklace or something, or the actual paperwork, we have to do what we do. So we want to honor your wishes, but a lot of people don't want to wear, you know, that little plastic
Well, the
bracelet.
ones I see, they're wearing them.
Yeah, even at the nursing homes, they don't necessarily put them on. Some of them have it with their paperwork, so the nurse will bring the paperwork and say that's it.
So how does that work if they're wearing it, you get there, you see it, but their loved one's saying, no, 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 you get working?
That can get pretty messy, but there's a lot
Yeah.
of paperwork involved if that does happen.
Okay.
It's not really a straightforward answer.
So realize if you're wearing a DNR, you're telling them.
Legally, if they're wearing a DNR, we're not supposed to, but like you said, that's a fine line with loved one if they're there. So we have to, if you're not wearing it, we have to see the paperwork, otherwise legally, we have to perform life-saving interventions.
Are there different fire stations in the areas of Wauwatosa that would come?
We have 3 in Wauwatosa, one here, one on Watertown Plank Road, just about to Mayfair, and then Mayfair and Capitol. On top of that, we have something called shared services. All the surrounding communities will work with us, so if for some reason we're out, or we have a big event going on, they will come in. So you may see a Milwaukee, you may see West Dallas responding into Wauwatosa. That's not uncommon.
There are quite a few commercial services, you know, that I've fallen and I can't get up. So is that then connected to you? I push this button and they call you because I can't?
Yes.
That's the way it works?
Those are great. We recommend them.
You do?
Especially as you're getting older, if you live alone.
You don't have a cell phone? Yeah, so perfect.
I don't have a cell phone.
Yeah, we highly recommend you getting some sort of system like that. We don't recommend one or the other, but definitely.
Are there some that you say avoid?
No. No, I don't think we have with any of them.
We don't have any royalties.
Sometimes they ran people off, but.
Those are all private services, and those private services contact our dispatch to get us called.
And that's pretty reliable?
Yeah.
So the only other thing I'd mention, if there's no other questions, is we talked about this up in worship. Just a reminder where the exits are if there is a fire. You know, if you're down here, you're going up these doors, up to the old Wauwatosa entrance, or up here in the corner, it takes you right outside. Obviously going back through the building farther. But just always be thinking about your exits. We talked about that with active shooter. We talked about that with fire. The recommendation is always good, no matter what building you're in, to be thinking about, well, how do I get out of here if there's an emergency? So thinking about this.
If you've got kids or grandkids, because we're putting evacuation route signs in the classrooms for Sunday school and so on, everybody's supposed to get back together in the west parking lot, particularly if you got kids. That's where they'll be if we ever did evacuate.
The west parking lot being the one across the street?
Across the street, by the firehouse. Yeah.
Otherwise, big thank you for coming over today. And if someone wasn't here today and wanted to watch the video, it'll be up on our YouTube channel. So, or if you want to watch it again. Thanks, guys.
Thank you for having us.